Yeah, man.
How you doing?
I'm doing all right. I've been waiting my whole entire Corona pandemic life for this.
Ah,
Yeah. Um,
are we recording?
I just put the record on. I
Okay.
don't. I don't. I don't know if that does the same thing for you,
Yeah, yeah. Well,
but I want
it says it's
my
recording.
records.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah, so maybe we can edit some of this stuff out.
Sure. No
Yep.
problem. What are you drinking today?
I had some soju for lunch,
Ah.
and now I'm drinking some whiskey. So Chloe and I are trying out this new Korean restaurant for delivery, not delivery, for pickup. And the food was like very kind of soju friendly. So my wife was like, "Why not? I don't work anymore, so have a few drinks."
Day drinking. Yeah.
Yeah,
I wish I could do it. I wish.
yeah. Well, it's still early on. It's still been just over a week, one day over a week since I got laid off. So my wife is still a bit tolerant. Uh,
Oh man, that hurts. That hurts.
oh man, it was painful. It was like a 5 minute Zoom call or WebEx call,
Yeah.
and so the head of Asia Regional, sent an invite for a meeting around 9 or 10 in the morning. It was at noon, and I was just gonna skip it, thinking it was just like some lame COVID update or something like that, right?
Ugh.
And then 30 minutes later, one of my colleagues messaged me. He's like, "That invite looks really weird, right?" It's like, "I think this is the end," and we all knew that it was coming,
Oh,
but
you
we
did.
didn't. Yeah, we none of us
Yeah.
suspected that he would do it in the middle of COVID. We all suspected that it would, or at least I personally suspected that it would happen sometime next year. So I looked at the invite, and it was him, everyone in the Singapore office, and like an army of lawyers and HR people, right?
Mm.
So then I was like, okay, this is definitely the end. Like I had a really good sense that this was the end. And then when I dialed in at noon, it you could tell that the environment where this call was being, started in or initiated was totally different from anything I'd ever seen before. It was like some dingy office room where it's in some like conference room with a podium or something like that. So as soon as it happened, I was in a bit of shock, and then I would say for about maybe 30 seconds, his audio wasn't working.
Uh-huh.
So the technician was like figuring it out, but he didn't give a shit. Like he just continued talking like we heard the first 30 seconds, but and then he said some bullshit, and then he's like, "We're closing the whole office," and then boom, that was it. The ending
Wow.
was so abrupt that we all stayed on thinking that something else was gonna be said. But that
Some
was it,
joke.
dude. It was so harsh, man.
Wow. First of all, I'm very sorry to hear that. How many people were on that call then?
I'm gonna say about 25.
25?
Yeah.
And is this rooted from I mean, basically it's because your business is not being able to sell its normal
No, because
revenue?
you know we actually had record breaking revenue the previous quarter. So the business. So I'm not really sure what this quarter's results are going to be, but
Previous quarter meaning like 2019 December or previous
yeah,
quarter as in okay, yeah.
yeah. And we're already budgeted for this full fiscal year. So that's why I had always assumed that we would at least, be able to stay on until the end of the year, right? But there's a lot of politics involved in this shit. So this lab was started by the current Asia head's predecessor, started this lab, and he was a big advocate of like innovation.
Uh-huh.
And this new guy is like all he wants is like more agents, right? Like he's like a traditional insurance guy, and he's like, insurance is sold by agents, like fuck this digital stuff. So he like advocates innovation, but what he really means is he wants more agents. So that's sort of why I sort of saw it coming, because his vision of everything was so different from the previous guy. But I don't think anyone would have imagined that he would have done it at this time.
So you were working for MetLife Labs? Is that what it is that what it was?
So I don't want to let's not mention names here
Oh,
because
okay.
I'm still under like contract, but it was the innovation arm for Asia for this insurance company.
Ah, I see. Okay.
Yeah, and I feel like we were really doing some good work. We were doing some really interesting things, you know. So we started off sort of tangentially creating like new business ventures that might not be related to insurance, and then we slowly started diverging into. Slowly, we started getting closer to the core business, which is typical of every innovation lab, right? And when we were tackling core innovation problem or core insurance problems, we were actually solving them and doing a really good job at bringing like sort of non-traditional solutions to some of their problems. And we were starting to, I think, make an influence on the bottom line. But we obviously didn't have a long enough runway with this new guy, and this new guy
Yeah.
he just didn't care. Like from the beginning, like the day he arrived, we were like, we kind of sensed that we were sort of in trouble. So
So they weren't closing up any other shops. It's just your, I guess, venture arm.
so I probably can't really talk about that.
All
My
right.
severance pay is still under contract, so maybe in like 2 months I could just like fucking say everything I want. But at the moment, I have no idea what's going to happen with this conversation. But
Right.
I think I should just stay tight-lipped for now.
Well, you can join me in this Bexu life because I'm technically unemployed too.
Yeah.
Um, we haven't had tours at all since February, so I've been just kind of scrambling at home, just trying to. Uh,
Well, instead of speaking personally, why don't we like begin this thing,
yeah.
right? How many minutes are we into it now? Let's say we're beginning now. So, Rob,
Hey,
hey,
how's it
tell me
going?
about yourself, man. Like, Rob, you and I have known each other. I think, I graduated in '97. I met you before that, right? So
Uh
maybe
huh.
I'm gonna roughly say I've known you since 1995. Is that safe to say?
I don't know. I'm trying to think. 1995, I was actually in New York City. I
Okay.
was going to school at NYU, and I graduated 98, and then I started working in Wall Street over there. My first job was in the World Trade Center number 2, actually.
Really?
Yeah, so I was working there
Okay.
for a year for this company. We can talk about company names.
Well, that was a long
Yeah,
time ago, so I don't see why not.
yeah,
I'm not. I'm just not
yeah,
mentioning my
yeah.
company name because it's so fresh, right?
Right, right, right. So it was a boutique investment bank, and well, actually, we were the second largest tenant in World Trade 2,
Okay.
and so I worked there until 1999, and then that's when I moved to California, and that's probably when
Okay.
I met you
Okay. Okay.
through
Yeah.
Steve.
Right.
I think who
So,
else.
so what I'm thinking is, I met you through the LA club scene. Sort of like not we didn't randomly meet at a club. Like we had mutual friends, but
Probably. I was big into that. I love
yeah.
the LA club scene.
So I didn't really start the LA club scene. I would say till like my high school year, senior in high school, which was
Uh-huh.
'93. I just guessed '95 because I just figured I met you sometime in the middle of
It was
like
a long time
the.
ago. I mean, it's
It
all
was. It was.
technicals, but yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
95, 98
Okay.
doesn't matter.
But yeah, I
99.
remember. I remember our mutual friends. There was Steve and Paul, and actually, those are the only two people I remember now. But anywho, it was a long time ago. I actually, well, I suspect that the LA club or the Korean American LA club scene is still, quite big. I just haven't been involved in that or have even remotely closely seen anything like that since, God, I'm gonna say maybe like 2000 or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I was. getting it into it when I was in New York. It was pretty big over there, but then it just kind of died out around like 1999.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Why is that?
I think it was just a different demographic. The
Hmm.
younger people weren't into it. It costs a lot of money,
It costs a lot of
and so
money. Well,
yeah,
I suspect that the rave scene probably had a lot to do with it.
could be, yeah, yeah, drugs and everything like that.
Yeah.
Um, so that's when I moved to California because I was thinking I needed this more. I wanted more of this Korean experience. And so LA was kind of like the epicenter for all that. If
Yeah.
you want to be Korean American, that's where everybody was at.
So I think this could be a whole other topic, right? Is that I've lived, and you and I have lived in Korea for a long time, so we've sort of like we've sort of lived it, absorbed it, gotten kind of sick of it. But every time I go back to California or the United States at large, and I meet Korean Americans, it's just awkward to me at how Korean they try to be, right? I
Yeah,
don't know if you ever saw that. Like they overcompensate, and I'm like, why?
yeah. I think a lot of us had that when we were growing up. I think identity issues and
Yeah, I know there were identity issues, but I never had that in high school or college. I think I almost rebelled against that. Like I was like, I'm not gonna call you young man. Like you and I are in. We're both like graduating the same year, and
yeah,
that doesn't mean fucking shit to me. And I just met you at a nightclub. I'm just gonna call you John. Your name is fucking John. I'm not
yeah.
gonna call you young or some shit.
I,
And
I've always had issue with that too, and it's not
yeah,
because it was anything that I wanted to respect people or to show disrespect or anything like that, but it was more of when I'm speaking English, then I'm going to refer to you in kind of a English American culture. But if I was
right.
speaking to you in Korean, then of course I would refer to you as, Hyung or Dongsaeng or by your title, really, right?
Now, I think that the issue for me was that a lot of it, especially in Southern California, was it was so related to like gang culture.
Mm-hmm.
I sort of had an issue with that, and I was just, I don't want to say rebellious, but I just wasn't into that. I just
Rebellious
kept
against the gangs.
no rebellious against like this whole title mentality, right? Like
Uh-huh.
so yeah, I just was never into that. So like I would go to a nightclub and I would just always call my waiter by his name. Like I never
Yeah.
called him Kel. I'm like, what is this shit? I'm like you're in fucking America now, man. Like figure it out, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Well, obviously, when I'm in Korea, it's a different story. But anyways, that's not really what we're here to talk about, right? That almost seems like a whole other topic in itself.
Yeah, it can be. It
No,
can
no.
be. Um, I
So
think
back to you. So you were in New York in finance, but you're not from New York. You're from Chicago.
right, right. So I was born in Korea, but I moved to the Chicago area when I was probably about a year old.
Hmm.
And so we moved all to different parts of Chicago, whether it be like downtown or the suburbs. And then we ended up uh, actually in Northwest Indiana, which is still probably about 30 minutes
How old
outside.
were you when you went to Indiana?
I think I was in the second grade.
So what's that
Uh,
like? What's that like in Indiana?
you
Being
know,
in second grader.
well, I think we were just completely influenced by Chicago media and so forth. Like if we watched uh, games, it would be Cubs games, White Sox, Bulls, Chicago Bears. So when the Chicago Bears won in 1985, we were all going crazy. We
Right.
loved, we would
Right.
shoot for them because the certain area that we were at, everybody
So
communicated with
the Bears
from.
being NFL football team,
Right, exactly, yeah.
and your parents were like into that stuff.
I wouldn't say that they were into that stuff. I think that the schooling system that I was in
I
really
see. So
was
you and your friends were into that stuff.
right.
Right.
And just because when you watch TV, all of the media was focused on that, right? So you'd
Mhm.
watch the news, and then it would be about the Bulls. It would be about the Blackhawks or whatever.
But the Bulls weren't, I know now that the Bulls weren't very big back then because I just watched that Michael Jordan
Yeah, I
documentary,
just
right?
did too.
Yeah, yeah. But I think the Bears were much bigger back then than the Bulls, right? The Bulls were not that much.
Right. So yeah, there was
Yeah,
a progression for sure.
yeah,
Um, I watched like all the Cubs games, and then the Bears were really popular in 1985, and then they came out with that song Super Bowl Shuffle, and everybody was doing parodies, not parodies, but mimicking that, and
yeah.
then
Which is kind of
um,
crazy because that's before social media, so you couldn't just like mimic that and just like post it anywhere. Like you actually had to get some organization to actually broadcast that for you, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, so this was like at school where we would do like talent shows and things like that, and
Right.
then
Okay. Okay.
we
Yeah.
would get together in groups and practice, and so it would actually be for like a school function,
Right.
right?
Okay. So
And
then you lived in Indiana, and then what? Eventually you moved to Chicago.
that was in my adult years when I
I
was in
see.
Chicago. Yeah.
But you went to
But
NYU.
yeah. So I went to New York and then studied finance and marketing over there. And that's when I was really into the whole Korean scene and the whole identity thing.
Right.
I went to a KLI program at Yonsei University for I think a summer.
What's KLI?
Korean Language Institute at Yonsei University in
Right.
1994.
AKA the pregnancy factory.
Like if you ever watch on Netflix the movie Soul Searching, that was even though that took place in the 80s,
Yeah.
that was exactly what life was like during that summer of 1994. It was just a lot
It
of
was in '94.
yeah, a lot
Okay.
of kids just from different parts of America,
Oh
LA,
man,
New
it
York.
must have been an absolutely crazy time.
Yeah, because everybody was just you know getting to know themselves and really building this bond with other Korean Americans from all over.
Well, this is what I imagine is that I've always been from Orange County, LA area, where there's like a shitload of Koreans. But
Yeah,
what I imagine is that there are a lot of Korean kids who really struggled with their identity, and then they go to Yonsei and just fucking explode.
yeah, but it's not just the people with identity issues like me. It was
Hmm.
people from New York and LA. They we would go nuts. Everybody would go nuts. You
Yeah,
know, you'd have like curfews, but and you'd also have like you couldn't go into the girls' dormitories
yeah,
after a certain time and things like that. But we were scaling the walls
yeah.
uh, after
So
hours trying to get
you
into
were
there.
in the international dormitory, right?
I think it was,
Yeah.
but there were some other Korean natives that were in
So
the dorms with us too.
you were there in. I'm trying to piece this together. You were there in what, 95,
94.
94. So
The hottest summer
I
it had been for 50 years at that time.
so okay. So I stayed there in I think maybe 2000 or 99 as a
Uh-huh.
grad school student, and that's just when they installed. Maybe a few years ago, they had installed air conditioning,
Yeah.
but more importantly, they had lifted the curfew, so there was no curfew. Like I could stay out as late as I
Oh
want,
yeah. We were old
and
school.
and I
Yeah.
sort of stayed there, not obviously I voluntarily stayed there, but I had very limited housing options at the time, so I stayed there begrudgingly. But that place is infamous for just being, the debauchery that fucking went on, not there, but in its ecosystem and environment around it.
Yeah, in Shinjuku, we were partying every single night, going
Yeah,
clubbing, drinking. That's where I really just explored that whole territory
So
and
is that the first time you went to Korea?
no, no. I mean, as an adult, I would say, but I went to Korea probably almost every summer vacation growing up until
Right,
maybe I was
right.
like 10. So, my mom and I and my sister would go to my grandmother's house, and yeah, just stayed the
Yeah,
whole
so
summer.
your parents are sort of like my parents, where they always almost made sure that I spent my summers in Korea.
Yeah, but then there was a point in time, like probably after I got into, I don't know, middle school and high school, where I just completely rebelled and didn't go. And in
Oh, you
fact,
didn't go.
yeah, I avoided. And in fact, um, yeah, I begrudgingly went in 1994 because my father made me go. And
Hmm.
I was gonna rebel again, and I wasn't gonna go. But then my cousin calls me up. He's just like, "Hey, I heard you're gonna go to the KLA." And I was like, I'm gonna go too." And so we
So
just kind
your
of bonded
cousin
that way.
in the U.S.
Yeah,
Okay.
from Jersey.
Okay.
And so he said he was gonna go. Let's meet up. And I was like, "Ah, okay, makes it a little bit more tolerable." But yeah, I absolutely fell in love with Korea at that time.
No regrets, right?
No, it was. I would
Yeah.
have to say, I would have to say that, in retrospect, that was the greatest summer in my entire life.
So
It was.
it was like your summer of '69.
Yeah, no, it was just eye-opening for me,
Yeah.
and I just even before that, I wasn't really like attracted to Asian girls, let alone Korean. But then there, I was just like, oh my gosh, everybody here is so beautiful, and
Mm.
just wanted to hook up with everybody. Um, and that just started my whole yellow fever.
I don't think it's called yellow fever when you're yellow, man. I think it's just called fever. Maybe horniness or something.
Maybe when you grow up in like a white area like I did
Right.
in Indiana, I
Right.
think that might uh,
Yeah, I had a bit of a different
advantage.
perspective because I was from Orange County in LA, where there's just like a shit ton of Koreans, right?
Yeah.
So
So just another day in the office for you.
yeah, so I would just go. I never went on any of those programs during high school. Well, in high school, I went on a couple of programs, but I was a bit of a late bloomer, so I was just like going to museums and all sorts of lame shit that the school would send me to. I didn't participate in any of those programs to Korea, but obviously, I went to grad school in Korea, and that was sort of when I got the taste of the whole Yonsei Shincheon kind of experience, right? So
Hmm.
different periods, but I think similar experience.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
So is that what sort of drew you to LA after, or was there something else? Like, you obviously
I think
graduated from
so.
LA.
I think so. I mean, it was just really that hunger and yearning for all things Korean, and so
Mm,
uh, at the end of college, when they closed the Korean clubs down, I was like, oh man, I need. I mean, that wasn't the only reason why I moved to LA. There was a lot of other reasons too, but it just made LA more appealing than like, yeah, another. Option that I was thinking about doing was going to Silicon Valley at the time, and
mm.
so I met a friend in LA, and he showed me the ropes, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm in love. And while I was there, I probably went to a club like maybe every other weekend.
Every other weekend. I don't know, man. Sounds like I think I remember it being much more. It probably was that you were paying for it every other weekend, but I think you were going more often. One thing I don't really remember about knowing you at that time is that I would always kind of see. I always knew you as like my LA nightclub party friend,
Uh-huh.
but I never really knew what you did during the daytime.
All right. What did I do? I was working for a fixed income asset management company. So just by saying that, then I think a lot of people would be confused as to what I did.
Mm,
I basically bought and sold securities,
mm,
right? So not stocks, but bonds,
mm,
right? And so we would buy them and manage that money investment for big clients like pension funds, endowments, those kinds of things,
Mm-hmm.
retirement funds.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a big business. And so I was coming from New York, off of that investment banking analyst program, and then coming into this program, trading bonds. And so I tried to explain to a lot of people what I did, but unfortunately, even my mom didn't even know what I was doing at the time. And so I just kind of gave up. I was just like, yeah, I'm
Well,
in
you
finance.
didn't give up because your mom doesn't. My mom doesn't know anything outside of doctor, lawyer,
Yeah,
dentist or something like that, right?
right.
And considering that probably 40% of the jobs that existed, maybe even 50% of the jobs that existed in 1980 when my mother and when my parents and our family immigrated to the U.S. never existed back then.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's not much of a surprise. So okay, there's that. I know. So I'm pretty sure I moved to Korea. I think like '98 or something like that. And then a couple of years later, you sort of showed up there, right? And then we connected again. Like when was that? I don't remember exactly.
I think it was like 2005. So that's when I
What?
moved
Okay.
there the first time.
Were you in California that whole time?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Working in finance.
I was working in finance, and then also I was trying to play poker as a profession. So
Yeah.
after I would get off of work, and then I would go to
Yeah.
Commerce Casino, and then I would just start low at like the 3-9 tables playing fixed limit no hold no fixed limit hold'em, Texas Hold'em.
Mm,
And so there are times I would be making like a couple thousand in, I'd say, a week, right?
mm-hmm.
And so that was great supplemental income. And then some at a certain point, it just got way too big. I stepped it up to like 2040, but then that's when I just got really rocked. Like, if you go up, you can get really good at certain levels and make money.
Mm,
But then when you notch it up with the blinds, uh, that gets really, it gets definitely, you have to get used to it.
mm,
And so that was such a big jump for me that I just couldn't handle it. And then I would be down like $1,000, or I would be down like my whole like salary for the month, and I'd be like, okay,
mm.
this is the ups and downs are way too much for this. And so I said I had to give up on that. But
Well,
that was my dream to like go to the World Series of Poker.
yeah. Well, this seems like something we could talk about for a whole hour, but it's interesting that you were actually able to sort of pull yourself out of it because I actually have a lot of friends who got sucked in like super deep, right?
Yeah, yeah, no, I could have easily done that, but I there's a definite, I think, a set of values that I uphold and want to keep.
Yeah,
And I just never got down to that level, never
yeah.
borrowed or anything like that. So, um, yeah, I mean, yeah,
Well,
that's a whole lot.
long story short, I used to have a college roommate that he would disappear for like 5 6 days at a time, and then his parents would call me, and then I would have to go look for him at all the local casinos and shit like that.
Oh,
So yeah, obviously you didn't get that far into it. So anyways, so you did that. You were in finance. You dabbled in a little bit of a professional poker, and then why Korea? Like, what made you move to Korea?
again, it was that I mean, I think I was at a point in my career where a lot of things just lost its luster, especially running the highs and lows of poker. I wanted something else, but also, I think it was that identity issue again, and really trying to figure out like what does it mean to be Korean, right? And so I thought I visited Korea, visit Steve over there, who was living there at the time, just kind of see where it was, what it was like. But also, I was doing this kind of I would just walk around the places where my parents would grow up. I walked around like where my father went to school, my mother went to school, and I was thinking to myself, these are probably the exact same places they were going to, 20 years ago, when they were going to, graduating and so forth. And it just kind of filled me up with these thoughts and this, romantic idea. And so I fell in love, you know, I fell in love. And yeah, I decided to quit my job and then move out to South Korea
When you were still in investment banking.
in asset management. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
And this
But
was in 2005?
yeah, but I
Okay.
think things were, yeah, I mean, with the highs and lows that were going on with the poker scene, I just really wasn't in a good mental state at the time.
Mm.
You know, I don't think I was performing well at work and, around people and things like that. I burnt a lot of relationships. Um, but yeah, I mean, I remember my girlfriend at the time. The way that we broke up was her just. I'm driving off with her latching onto the side of the door. I was just like, this is not a good place where I want to be right now.
Mm.
So it got really dark really fast, and so moving to Korea was just like, I don't want to say it was just like a spur of the moment. It kind of was, but at the same time, there's all these run-ups uh, to actually moving that it actually
But
made sense.
but you didn't have a gig lined up in Korea, right?
Right. Yeah.
Or you didn't have like this plan, like, or you didn't have this soft landing that some, very lucky people have, where you had a company might have transferred you over or something like that. You were just like, I'm done with this. I don't know what happened with your ex girlfriend at the time. I don't think I knew her, but you're like, I'm done with this. This job sucks ass. Here's a one-way ticket. Boom, I'm out of here.
Yeah. Um, no, there was no job lined up, but at the same time, people were talking about how easy it was to get a job at the time. If you spoke English, at the very least, you could teach English. They were saying that, yeah, you could do gigs at the radio station. And so that all sounded appealing to me. And I just moved, thinking that, I could maybe like squeeze into one of these positions. And I was actually just kind of yeah, so I was just like playing for like 3 months when I first got here.
Hmm.
Um, just hanging out with new people, meeting new people, drinking with new people, and just kind of seeing what the whole scene was all about. And then my mom was getting pissed off. She was all worried and everything like that. Like, you don't have a job, and what are you doing out there? Yada yada da. And so finally, she called up one of her friends to hook me up with a job.
Hmm.
So I was working for this company called, well, a research institute here in Korea called KISTI, Korea Institute of Science and Technology Information.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and so that was an interesting gig. It was interesting in the beginning, but
Hmm.
then towards the end, it just got so lame. In the beginning, I was doing some interesting things like writing a tech report,
Hmm.
just about like all the trends that were taking place in technology these days. Uh, Able to do it in English, but then people read it in the beginning, but then because it was in English, I think people just kind of skipped over it, and then there's like, oh, why don't you teach me English? So I was just like, okay, well, I can teach you English after class, after work today, and so at 6 o'clock, I sit down and teach them English, and yeah, so
So since 2005, you've been in Korea the whole time. Like you didn't have like
no,
a period.
no, 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 no.
No.
It actually ended abruptly because I got a call from my sister saying that my dad had cancer, and so they
Okay, I
said that,
remember that. I remember
yeah.
that. Yeah.
So he didn't have that much time to live because he had pancreatic cancer. He that's like one of the worst
Yeah.
ones. right? So
Yeah,
as soon as
sorry.
you
Yeah,
find
I
out,
remember that. Yeah,
yeah, then yeah, you're pretty much a goner. And so
yeah.
I had to fly back as soon as possible, wrap things up. Um, yeah, and so I ended up flying back to Chicago, and then taking care of my dad. They said they were going to give him 6 months to live. He only lasted 4, and then after that, I just stuck around, took care of my mom, got a place in the city, and then started working. Did I? Oh no, yeah, yeah. So yeah, just took care of my mom for a while, and then she was so dependent on my dad that she didn't know what to do afterwards. So I kind of stuck around and stayed with her, and she got dependent on me, and I tried to teach her how to become more independent.
Yeah.
But yeah, during that time, I did some crazy stuff too. I mean, I got back into to playing poker again because they got river boats over there. Uh, but one thing that I did was I actually ran a marathon. So I trained for a marathon. My sister like dared me to work train with her, and so 2007 I ran the LA Marathon, um,
Hmm.
and I finished.
A full
So
marathon.
full marathon, like
Wow,
26.2 miles.
that's pretty
Um,
cool.
yeah, so I thought I was like, gonna go get crazy fit and things like that, but no, I didn't really even lose weight doing that because I was eating
Yeah,
so much, I think, right?
yeah,
But yeah, I was like the same weight and everything like that. It was kind of like disheartening because I thought that I'd be
yeah.
so healthy.
I have a similar story where I thought, where if I make this significant, I'll talk about it next time. But if I make this like significant change in my life and make, reach these goals, that I would physically be transformed. But I was just the same skinny dude, but just a lot stronger.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I still had like a pot belly too, which
yeah,
pissed me off. So
yeah, yeah.
I was just like at the end of it, I was like, I'm never gonna run another marathon. I can just say I did
Right.
it, but it's so not worth it. I mean that's
So
there's that's not to
you're,
say anything about marathons.
yeah,
It's just not for me.
but you're back in the U.S. Why did you come back to Korea again? I'm actually sort of, I'm in a bit of a fog. I'm sure we talked about this before, but I don't quite
Yeah.
remember. So you're taking care of your mother, and then you're running marathons and playing poker and shit. So what happened?
Well, then I started working.
Back in finance?
Yeah, I was at Bank of America.
I remember this. B of A. Yeah.
Yeah, and then 2010. Well,
Mm-hmm.
the thing is, I hated being there because I hate being in Chicago overall because the circumstances of
Yeah.
the situation and so forth. But just the fact that I left Korea so abruptly, I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to redeem myself and I wanted to go back. So, I'd make friends in Korea in Chicago, but then, the conversation was always leading to, yeah, Korea's so awesome. I want to go back,
Yeah. So
you
when is
know.
this roughly?
When I go back to Korea,
Yeah, like roughly when
yeah,
you make that
yeah,
transition
yeah.
again.
So I moved back here on November 15th, 2010.
Oh, very specific day. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I remember it too.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
remember I gave my 2 weeks and then I was just like, I'm gone, you know?
So it's funny. I'm sort of, I'm terrible with numbers. I'm not like you where I can like remember exactly when I moved and shit. So I actually need to refer back to my resume and as to when I lived where and when I did it. But so you were, we sort of like cross paths, right? Like
I
you were
think
in Korea and I'd be in the U.S. and then like you would come back to Korea and then I would move to Southeast Asia. So I remember, otherwise we would have hung out a lot more in Korea. No?
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, you were in the Philippines for a while, weren't you?
I was. I was in
Yeah.
Manila for quite a
Yeah.
while. Yeah,
I think that was during my time over here.
yeah.
But I
But
was doing some traveling
since that
myself.
second time you went to Korea, you've not transitioned back, right? You've stayed in Korea. You met your
Yeah,
wife, had
yeah. So
kids.
I've been here for the last 10 years now.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, it's um, it's been an interesting
So
ride,
okay,
but
so I actually okay now it's sort of coming back to me. I remember the second time you came to Korea, you were all into this sort of travel thing.
yeah. So I mean that's one time I was just like, I really want to just follow my heart and do
Yeah.
what I feel like I'm called to do, and um, the second, but again at the same time, the second time I came out here, I didn't have a job or anything like that. I just came out,
Mm.
you know, and so I was interested in just traveling at the
Mm.
time, and I I took a trip to different places here. I went to China a couple times, Philippines a couple times, but then I saw that there was an ad saying that Americans can go to North Korea.
So this is the crazy thing, right? Like
Yeah.
you are the only Korean American person I know that have traveled to North Korea on leisure, and not just once. Well, I guess maybe the first time it was on leisure. I don't know. You can tell the story better, but eventually maybe you can say it was more for work than for leisure. But you've been to North Korea a couple of times.
Many times. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Many times. Yeah. I mean, the first time was obviously for leisure because, this was going back to the story where I saw this ad and saying you can go to North Korea. And I thought, wait a second, you can't go to North Korea as an American. I got to research this a little bit more. But then I realized, people were going back people had been going there for a long time.
So to add to that story, I remember like back in '99 or something, I
Uh
was in
huh.
Korea and I traveled to Beijing and with a couple of friends. And I remember walking past the North Korean embassy in Beijing and
Yeah.
taking some pictures in front of there. And they specifically had a sign that said, Americans, Koreans, and journalists need not apply for visas. Obviously, meaning that they wouldn't get approved, right?
Yeah.
And then, comically on the bottom of that, it said, all visa applications are accepted in US dollar only. At the time, I was an American, ethnically Korean, and at the time I was a journalist. So I didn't qualify on all three counts. So when I
Right.
heard that you had gone to North Korea the first time, I remember you telling me about it. It like, my mind was blown. Like I was like, and you were sort of getting into this yourself. You thought yourself that as a Korean American, you could not travel to North Korea.
Yeah. I was mind boggled. I mean, I had also gone to Beijing and other cities and been to like North Korean restaurants, and that was very interesting. And so there was always an interest in North Korea. I was at the time I was like eating up all the news about everything North Korea. But growing up, you were always taught that North Korea was your enemy. That you hate them, and I think other generations had to go through this propaganda where they said, if we don't work hard enough or long enough, or then North Korea is going to come in and attack us. That kind of like rhetoric. Um, so I thought something's not right here. I don't
Mm,
get what's going on. But at the same time, you hear about all these stories online saying that people actually went there and they were fine.
yeah.
And I just kind of took a leap of faith. I was just like, you know what, the news is probably
you
full of
know,
shit.
I
And
didn't see those stories. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I was pretty much fully immersed into the propaganda that the moment you step foot in North Korea, you're a dead person.
right, right. Well, I found out this Google trick at the time for looking for news that if you do a search for North Korea in quotes, and then you say like minus nuclear missiles or something like that,
Mm,
then you see like a whole new array of search strings talking about a different side of Korea, about Korean
right,
tourism,
right,
about
right.
the beauty and culture, and I was just like, oh, okay, there's this aspect of it that
Yeah,
is being totally covered up by the whole
Well,
belligerence and so forth
no,
that's going.
I totally understand that now. Like having lived in Singapore for a long time, I've actually met a lot of Europeans, a lot of Japanese, and some Southeast Asians who have actually traveled to North Korea and had, a really good experience, right? But I think the first time that I heard you going to North Korea, and at the time sort of like you were sort of like trying to, I'm not going to egg me on, but like inviting me to join you in one of your trips. I was like absolutely fascinated. I was like, I was like, this can't be true, right?
Yeah.
So you were sharing some photos and stuff, and it literally blew my mind. And the fact that you actually sort of made it into a business, I thought was absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, so I went to North Korea the first time as a tourist, and I think it was like maybe like a week-long trip,
Mm,
and I just saw a completely different side of everything. I went to Pektu Mountain, which is this iconic uh, mountaintop with a crater and a lake on, and I actually went swimming. It's the same lake and mountain that Moon Jae-in went
mm,
to visit his last when he went there with Kim Jong Un, and went to the DMZ. That was exciting, but at a certain like towards the middle of my trip, I mean, the trip was so worth it. I forgot how much it cost, but like several thousand euros or something like that. But anyway, it was worth it after the second day. But towards like the middle of the tour director of the company that I went with, he's just like, "Hey, Rob, I see how well you get along with these North Korean peoples. How would you like to work with us and be a tour guide?" And I was just like, that's when my mouth just dropped. I was just like, holy shit, this is crazy to think that I could actually work. I don't even know if it's legal for me to work here and so forth. Um, so I almost choked on my coffee. It was during breakfast. And I said to him, I said, hey, you know what? That's a generous offer. Let me think about it. I'm just trying to just enjoy my trip right now. But, we could talk afterwards, right? Um, so I just I went through the entire trip. I went back, and then I was like thinking about it. I was just like, is this guy for real? And then like I was doing some research. I was telling some other friends about it, and they're just like, oh yeah, there's all these other Korean Americans that actually do tours in North Korea. There's this other guy who does a goat farm in North Korea. And I was
right.
like, are you fucking serious? Like, connect me with these people. And so I connected with them, and they were sharing me kind of their story about how they first got involved. And these are American citizens, Korean Americans, by the way. And they were telling me about how they were doing things. And so one thing led to another, and they were kind of hyping me up about this. It's like, yeah, it's a very unique experience, opportunity. You can get so much out of it.
Mm,
And then I finally called that tour director back. I was just like, hey, is that offer still on the table?
mm.
He's just like, yeah, yeah, come on by, and then we'll put you on some tours. And so I was a tour guide in North Korea for about a year, and going in and out. I went in about 9 times, and so
Nine times.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah, it was yeah, it was
I remember. I remember at that time. So I had my game company. So I had a lot of software engineering requirements, and you were actually trying to, arrange or hook me up with maybe some type of engineering resources in North Korea. I specifically remember that.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't really, I don't. Because they were just kind of like hungry for business.
Right.
Like they really wanted to
Well, this
connect
is
with the rest of
when
the world.
the Kaesong thing was really big, and was it sort of part of the Sunshine Policy back then?
Yeah. That Kaesong Industrial
Yeah,
Complex, that was all part of it. But
you know,
I never I thought about it and I tried to hook people up, but then at
yeah,
the end I was just like, I don't know if this is going beyond the Call of Duty here, and I just really stuck to the tourists because
mm,
I really just really enjoyed telling people about Korea and showing
mm,
them the beauty and culture of it. And
mm,
yeah, the main clientele were European men in their 30s or 40s, a lot Americans as well. Um, but yeah, it was just a very unique experience, especially as a Korean American going into there. You really kind
mm.
of see like what is truly Korean culture. I mean, as a
Right,
Korean
right.
American, it's sometimes hard to kind of see what's Korean culture and American culture, right? But then when you overlay that with North Korean culture, then you're just like, oh, there's some core fundamental Korean values here, and
Right.
it just makes you think about like how this truly was one country at a certain point.
So I really want to get into this, but I feel like this could be a whole other hour or two, maybe three.
Yeah.
So this episode is really, something where we sort of get to know you. So let's move from there to where you sort of had this, almost just a job as a tour guide to sort of where you're like, okay, I'm going to turn this into a startup or a career or a business.
Yeah, so I got back, and you know, I think part of it was just getting people to understand North Korea, to recognize it. There's all this political BS that's going on, that's being hyped and sensationalized by the media. So there was probably a need for good information out there, like real information about North Korea, and so I started up a blog and a company to kind of promote North Korea, and so I called it Yangpa Tours. And I would just post up anything related to North Korea on the blog. Promoted the tours, saying that hey, yes, you can go there, and you're gonna go there with the care of a Korean American, and talking about addressing like all the ethical issues and so forth, and what reservations people might have to really just kind of um, brush away all the misinformation out there, because there was a lot that really just kind of uh, got people unattracted to visiting there as a tourist location.
But this was a certain window of time where you were able to travel to North Korea as a Korean American. Because I remember there was a time when you were like very enthusiastically encouraging me to go, and that enthusiasm sort of like went away. I'm sure after some crazy geopolitical. I'm saying geopolitical, but
Yeah,
North Korea did some crazy shit, right?
yeah.
You know, do you still feel this way?
Well, I mean, my career in North Korea came to a crashing halt after the whole Kenneth Bay incident happened.
Right, right,
So, like around 2012, he was busted. I think he was probably like evangelizing in North
right,
Korea or
right.
something along those lines. And so they put me in the same boat as him as a Korean American Christian, which, I mean, you could argue that I'm a Christian, but it's not like I'm a pastor or like a missionary or
Yeah,
anything like
yeah.
that. I'm not sitting there like, bringing Bibles in or anything like that. Um, but regardless, they said that, it's not a good situation right now. And, so we're not allowing you to come in. And so that was I felt very betrayed at that time, and so yeah, that was the last time I went in there, and so um, I think that really just uh, put just put the flame out, really.
Mm.
I think after that I just really didn't talk about it that much anymore.
So this is still at a. Is this when you sort of started your own tour company?
Yeah, yeah. So in doing that, I really enjoyed showing people, tourists, travelers, the beauty and culture of Korea. And so I started taking tourists around Korea here, right, in
Mm,
South Korea,
mm.
showing them Seoul, DMZ, all the way to Jeju-do and back. And so, I was getting some traction just from other people who were interested from
But
North Korea
but you
tourists.
had a very interesting service in that you did a lot of like very bespoke tours, right? Like I remember you would inquire to me about like people who were interested in esports or something like that, and you were doing like a lot of custom tours as well.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those ideas come from the clients themselves saying that
Mm,
they want specific things, and so you can arrange all this stuff in advance. We've done some pretty gnarly tours where we do the e-gamings, we do like the K-pop concerts and things like that. But we also bring in schools and
mm.
companies who want to do these kind of mice trips over here. But
Well, what's a mice trip for people who don't know what that means?
MICE is just it's an acronym for meetings, incentives, conferences,
Yeah.
and events. And so those types of corporate clients are very lucrative
Mm,
when it comes to travel. And so those guys wanted to have a representative here in Korea to kind of uh, yeah, be the boots on the ground to
mm.
manage this
Right,
and
right,
that,
right.
fix them this and that, and manage their hotels and do this and that. So that's a lot of what I was doing
And
for.
then you moved on to a tech startup.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so as I'm doing this business, I'm kind of seeing like what are the opportunities, what are the missed opportunities, because I felt that a lot of tourists were coming to Korea, and we're not utilizing a tour guide for whatever reason. And we just kind of analyze those reasons and be like, okay, maybe the solution to this is to provide real time, real time, like on demand tour guides, right? So
Right,
kind of like being like the Uber for tour guides.
right.
So that if you were just traveling wherever you were in Seoul or South Korea, and you wanted somebody to show you around or help you around, you could find a tour guide that was probably maybe like 500 meters away from you,
Mm,
and there's a tracking device, and you can find each other and text each other, and then when you guys finally meet, which is like in 5 minutes, call it, then that person would be a local of that area simply because he probably works in that area or lives in that area and knows that area better than any
right.
other professional tour guide.
And
And so
I
that
thought the
was the gap
idea
that we
was
filled.
I thought the idea was really good because Westerners are sort of moving away from this traditional group tour guide mentality to more this like individualized, personalized, almost like this gonzo, spur of the moment type thing. So
Yeah.
yeah, I thought it was actually the timing was quite good. I thought for your startup.
Yeah, no, it was great. I think people who used it really, really loved it.
Mm,
But I think the issue was that we weren't getting enough users and we were running out of money. Because
mm,
the way that a lot of the some of the money was allocated to us from these government programs was that you had to use it in a certain amount of time. So
right,
we
right,
had to use it, within like 3 months, or we had to use it
right,
in
right.
6 months, or the big sum in like a year. And
Mm,
it's just like, this is not the way I really want to manage this money. I want to be able to spend this money when we need it and be lean when we need to be.
right.
And so that became that our window or our runway was exactly 1 year. And after
Yeah.
1 year, they shut everything off. So we had to
Yeah,
spend all the money at that time.
yeah, I know. I've been through that similar programs in Korea where the mentality is that you're no different from a big corporation where you have consistent, budgets throughout the year, right? And they don't
Right.
really understand what the flexibility that's needed of a startup in Korea. And honestly, that once again, that could be a whole different episode in itself, and how
Yeah.
yeah, the whole startup scene in Korea and the government's sort of involvement and sort of the VCs in Korea and there's sort of I think there's a lot of changes in that industry, and it's different from I think when you and I were trying to raise money and do our startups there. So you know we should invite someone from our network and sort of do a whole show on that. But yeah.
Yeah.
So what is the status of your startup now?
Well, I closed that company down.
Mm,
So I'm back to my original company,
mm,
which is a travel agency, which, yeah, that, that's a whole nother story right now
right,
during this COVID
right,
pandemic.
right.
But yeah, so I closed it down. I copied down all the coding and things like that.
Mm.
So if we ever wanted to start it back up again, we could. But I think the environment is not conducive for something like that at this point right now.
Yeah.
It would have been, a couple of years ago if we could have kept the money and used it strategically at our own discretion and timing, but that wasn't the case at the time. So
Yeah. Yeah. So
I think
it's
there's
quite
still a chance
unfortunate.
for that.
I have similar stories with my startup in Korea too. So we could probably talk about that
Yeah.
at a different time as well. So yeah. Yeah. So I feel like that's sort of our journey from when I first got to know you. Obviously, there's very interesting things, before I got to know you, or got to know you and I both got to know each other. But that's sort of, I think, within the time frame that you and I have known each other, a very good summary of sort of what your journey has been from, living in the U.S., coming to Korea, going back, and I've been through kind of a similar situation as well. So yeah, that's really interesting. So I don't know, what are your thoughts now? Like, it's mid 2000 or 2020, all sorts of crazy
I
COVID.
wish.
Exactly. All sorts of crazy COVID shit is going on. Things that honestly I would have never imagined could have happened or would have happened. So, briefly in this short amount of time we have left, what are you thinking? Like in the next 1 year, 5 years, etc.
Yeah, I mean, the travel industry right now is on their hands and knees. 2019 was probably the best year we ever had here in Korea, and then 2020
Mm,
comes along and it completely shuts down what we're doing. So, um, I still have the company open. We're still, dealing with a lot of the like uh, the tours that have been canceled, and refunding money and canceling this and that and so forth. But one of the things that we're working on now are these private virtual tours. And so
mm,
this is another one of those things that really just came from one of our clients
mm-hmm.
that he said, he's in Germany. He wanted to do a surprise gift for his wife, who was turning 64. And what we did was we set up a tour where we do the same tour of Korea the same way we usually do, but we did it with Skype. So I would be going around Korea talking about Korea, and then I had a cameraman who would follow me around, and we would do this live broadcast, this Skype, where it's completely interactive. They see what I'm talking about and what I'm seeing, and then
Live.
they ask, yeah, live. And
Mm.
so obviously there's a time difference between here and Germany, but when it was 3 p.m. over here, it was still daylight. It was 8 a.m. over there. So as soon as they wake up, they're able to get onto their computer, hook it up to their TV, and then just kind of see what Korea was all about from the perspective of this Skype program.
That's crazy shit, dude. Please don't tell me that's the future of traveling.
Well, it's not the end all replacement, but
Yeah.
one of the great feedback that we got from that was that this is not. I mean, it's not going to replace travel entirely, but one thing that they said to us was that the first thing that they're going to do when this pandemic is over is book a flight to South
To
Korea.
Korea. Hey,
to
listen,
get
I gotta
this.
take a bio break, so give me a minute.
Oh, okay, me too.
Sorry about that. Let's edit that out.
Yeah, no, no. I'm so glad that you actually said that because I had to go
Okay.
too and
All right.
refill my water.
Yeah, I needed to top up my drink as well. So yeah, okay. Virtual tours, man. That's some crazy shit.
Yeah, and so we did one again last Saturday for a reporter who was interested in what we were doing. So hopefully she's going to turn that into a beautiful article.
Oh,
And that
a reporter from what? Korea?
no, from the Middle East.
Oh, wow.
Uh, it's like NBC or something like that. Middle East Broadcasting Corporation, I think. Don't, yeah. But anyway, we sent her some information, like the videos that we took, and then she's right now writing it up, and then yeah, I also made like a little small blog post on my website where I'm kind of talking about what we did and promoting that as well. But yeah, I mean, these virtual tours, it's not something we can depend on. I mean, if we get like
Right.
another one, we'd be very happy because they're actually a lot of fun to do. And but yeah, I'm not expecting that much more traction from that unless uh, this article can get us some and then get us on CNN or something like that. But yeah, it's
Maybe you
kind of
can get like a Facebook group going and then do like a group tours of like, 50, 100, 1,000 people. It's really no limit now, right? In terms of the amount of people who are watching you live.
yeah, that's not a bad idea. I mean that's pretty good. I mean, I think maybe filling it up with the content and then setting up.
You just need to set up some type of payment gateway and say like, okay, I don't know, 3 p.m. KST, $3 a person. I'm gonna give you a live tour of, JYP Studios. We'll take questions on WhatsApp. Blah blah blah. That could be kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean that would be good too. But what I loved about it was that it was very private and personalized, right?
Mm,
So you weren't doing anything on WhatsApp or chatting or anything like that. It was
mm.
just a conversation like you and I are having right
Right,
now.
one on one. Okay.
But we're taking this outside,
Right,
and
right,
simply because Korea has not been put on any lockdown. It's one of the few countries in the entire world where this is actually possible.
right, right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, I'm sure, you have your own ideas about that, and I think it's quite interesting. So yeah. So
yeah.
yeah, there we are, man. Like pretty much the past 20, 25 years of your life in a 1 hour nutshell. So that's quite interesting. There's a lot of things that, for me, I've known you for a long time, but obviously there were some gaps, and obviously my memory is pretty bad, so I don't remember a lot of the stuff. But very interesting, very interesting, and hopefully next time, you and I can talk about something a bit more modern and a bit more relevant.
Well, hopefully next time I can interview you like this so
Yeah.
that we
Yes,
can
please.
talk about so that we can match up here and
Yeah.
get caught up and
So
then talk about like
whoever,
history stuff.
the one or two people who are listening to us can kind of look
Yeah.
back and sort of get to know sort of our bios and shit. So yeah. Well, cool, man. So our 1 hour is coming up, and thank you so much. That was really interesting.
Uh-huh.
I've written down a couple of things that I think that we can talk about, going forward, in terms of just our similar experiences in the startup industry in
Yeah.
Korea, and just I think our I guess our journey as Korean Americans going from Korea to the U.S. to Korea to the U.S. to Korea again.
Yeah, no, I had a great time.
So
This is awesome.
yeah. So yeah, well, hopefully next time, same time this week, or next week. We'll figure this out and we'll talk again.
Okay, sounds good to me.
All right, that's a wrap.
All right.
I thought it was pretty good, man.
Yeah, it was